It's time for another arcade episode, which of course means emulated video footage. We start today's list with Namco's side-scrolling spy action classic, Rolling Thunder, from 1986. This is one of those games that I played a lot on my Commodore 64. In fact, enough to find out that there is a game-killing bug in the C64 version, which halts your progress from, I think it was either the 4th or 5th level. Back when I was a kid, Rolling Thunder wasn't one of my most revisited games even nearly, because the only version I had any access to was the C64 version, which always felt too clunky, slow and uncooperative for me, even though there was a sense of fun in sneaking around and entering rooms to find better weapons or more bullets. It wasn't until I played the arcade version on MAME some 20 plus years ago that I found out how brilliant the game actually is. Through the original version, I developed some techniques that would eventually get me to reach the super glitchy end of the C64 version. So I suppose it goes without saying that after finding this out, the arcade version would become the only version I would bother to play anymore. Perhaps if I were to do a comparison, there would be some reason to return to the C64 version, but the arcade version is where it's at. Luckily, it can be found rather easily from those Namco arcade game compilations released from PlayStation 2 onwards if you want to have it in your collection properly. We continue with another spy action game, Cloak Dagger, from Atari 1984. This one is a more recent finding, but it was such a great find that it has become one of my most revisited games on MAME since finding it for the Unique Games series on my blog some 8 years ago. On surface, Cloak Dagger is a variation of Berserk or Robotron 2084, but there are some quite interesting features that set this game properly apart. The game is set inside your run-of-the-mill evil mastermind's underground facility complex lair base thing, where you must proceed downwards by killing the evil minions, collecting info packages for evading minefields later on, and try to be quick about it, because each of the floors have a big bomb in the middle, set up to explode within about 30 seconds or less. Later on, as you get deeper into the caverns, you have to shoot your way through solid rock and deal with tougher enemies. As I mentioned in the Unique Games entry in 2017, Cloak Dagger was originally developed as Agent X, with no relation to the Mastertronic games, but was retitled into its final form to coincide with the movie of the same title, because the game actually makes its appearance in the movie. Not as an arcade game though, but rather an Atari 5200 game, which would never get finished and released in reality, so they used the arcade game in the movie to fake it. Even more fantastically, the movie Cloak Dagger was released as a double feature to the theaters simultaneously with another movie with an arcade game as an integral part, The Last Starfighter. Well, that game never actually existed as an arcade game until a group of fans by the name of Rogue Synapse made a PC version of the game in 2004. But although I did play that one a couple of times to see what it was, I don't really have any actual nostalgia for it, but you can find the link to Rogue Synapse's website in the video description if you want to check it out. As for that Cloak Dagger game, you're gonna have to buy the Atari 50th Anniversary Collection to get to play it. Another game that could have just as easily been on a C64 episode is Sega's Bank Panic from 1984, although I grew up knowing this game as West Bank, as it was published by Dynamic and Gremlin a year later. Along with the usual excuse of already having too many games for the C64 to get through, I could say the arcade version of Bank Panic is different enough to have a reason to be included here instead. Bank Panic is about two things: getting money deposited into the bank from the good townsfolk, and protecting the money from bank robbers and terrorists. The game is viewed from the interior of the bank, looking at the doorways with 3 doors at a time. In this original arcade version of the game, you get to shoot your guns with 3 different fire buttons and move left or right whenever nothing else is happening in the currently viewed doorways. You complete a level by getting a $sign displayed on all the miniature doors in the line above the action screen. Compared to West Bank, the original Bank Panic has a lot more to offer in terms of visual gags and different content, but of course the basic gameplay is largely the same. If you want to know more about all versions of Bank Panic and West Bank, there's a link to their comparison blog entry as well as the video accompaniment in the video description. Usually I wouldn't feature a game twice for any of these lists on different platforms, but because Michael Jackson's Moonwalker was designed as a completely different game for the arcades and for Sega's home consoles, not to mention the unfathomably bad US Gold game for the home computers, I had to make an exception here.
Moonwalker.
Instead of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, the arcade version of Moonwalker is an isometric action game that combines street brawling and shoot-em-up elements, along with the plot of Mr. Big trying to take over the world and having kidnapped all these unfortunate kids, which you as Michael then have to rescue from all over the game's different areas, while thwarting Mr. Big's evil plans. While the gameplay is obviously very different to the other two Moonwalker games, what really makes this one a more fun ride than the others is the more commonly appearing Mecha Michael, which is activated by picking up Bubbles, MJ's famous pet chimpanzee. Still, as with the Sega home console game, the one thing missing from this game is the appearance of Michael's motorist rabbit incarnation as shown in the Speed Demon music video portion of the movie. This character does appear in the US Gold game, but it's such a bad implementation of the idea that it's just not worth bother playing that one. If you want to know more about how horrible the US Gold game is compared to the Sega's arcade and console games, you can read all about it in my more than a decade-old comparison, which has been linked in the video description also. Anyway, my nostalgia for the arcade Moonwalker game comes, as most of any nostalgia for arcade games in my case do, from my early days of emulating with MAME. In the case of Moonwalker, I remember having no idea that this game actually existed as an arcade game before coming across this online, much less realizing this was considerably different from the other incarnations of Moonwalker as a game. I think I actually plowed on through the game by feeding the game as many virtual coins as it took, but whenever I got to play the arcade game again, I don't recall ever getting further than the third level before getting bored of the game's design never actually changing. If you're a fan of MJ though, you will likely go through the same initial process as I did, maybe more times, but I'm not sure it's actually a better game than the one Sega made for the consoles. Still, it's worth checking out. Today's list ends with a 2-for-1 entry because there's no reason to treat these two games as separate entities. An arcade game developing and manufacturing company called X-City Incorporated, who were known from such classics as Circus, Death Race, Venture, and Mousetrap, went on to create a series of light gun arcade games, with the first of them being Crossbow from 1983. This one I didn't play as much as the two I'm about to mention because I found it too late to be of any interest. But their last traditional coin-operated video game was also a light gun shooter called Who Done It, released in 1988. Between these two, they released at least 3 or 4 other light gun shooters, from which Cheyenne from 1984 and Chiller from 1986 had an unusual amount of replays in my early MAME gaming days. X-City's light gun shooter games were always more visually extravagant than, say, Nintendo or Sega's offerings later on, and had some sort of an interesting level progression. Cheyenne appealed to me thanks to its Old West theme, but Chiller was the one I played the most thanks to its gory horror graphics and sounds, which were the height of entertainment to my horror fanatic self at the age of 18 or 19. Although at first I was shocked by the fact that this game had even been released in the mid-80s, I was even more shocked later by the knowledge of this game having also been converted for the NES later on, with some necessary censorship having been utilized there. Although the graphics and the themes were perfectly fitting for my taste back then, what really drew me into these two XD shooters was how they're built. Instead of your usual mindless target shooting, you're given missions to accomplish in each section. And accomplishing these missions would earn you better points than just simple mindless shooting. In Chiller, for instance, there's a torture chamber where you get more points by activating torture devices instead of shooting the victims to their instant death. But I'm not going to show that footage here in this video because it's just that graphic. Cheyenne is easily the less viewer-restricting game and is just about enjoyable in its own right. But outside of MAME, you're probably gonna have a hard time finding any of the XD light gun shooters.